Hi there. My name is Jason Doctor, and this is my project here, at least as far as my reflection and my visioning of global competency and my capstone project. I've titled it Becoming Globally Competent, and I'll just take it through here. So when I think about my own global competency, I do have to trace the origins of that back prior to the GCC program. And really, my first opportunity to really develop the skills and behaviors and attitudes of someone who we might consider to be globally competent was when I was an exchange student to West Germany. And it was Bremen. And I was, 16, 17 years old. And, really, just starting to emerge and develop those skills. It was there for a year. But when you live immersed in another culture, you're kind of forced to start adjusting your own ways of seeing the world and your own way of being within that world. Before I move on to the next slide, though, I also, growing up in Bemidji, I was surrounded by a large Native American community that I had some strong ties to. And so even at home, that cross-cultural dialoguing, those skills associated with that is something that I was working on. And I probably wouldn't have been aware of really as something that I would consider skills of global competency if I hadn't put the two together or had the travel experiences that I did. When I was in college, I did do a study abroad program in Kenya, and this is a picture of Lamu here, and this is really probably an area where I found that I was unsuccessful as far as developing the skills necessary to be globally competent. I was doing a research project that required that I do some dialoguing and do some research with some of the Arabic scholars that were living on the Isle of Lamu, and I just didn't do a good job of developing the level of trust that would allow for me to complete my work. But it was a strong learning experience for me. As a young professional, I got a job in Mexico City. This is the school I worked at. It was called ITESM. And I lived there for a year, and I worked with students that were native Mexicans. And again, just further developed those skills. I was put in situations where I had to reflect on my own values that I brought with me. They could consider it baggage, my own cultural baggage. And it was just forced to deal with that on a daily basis, especially when you're working with 14, 15, 16-year-olds. They'll let you know when you're kind of talking about your own cultural baggage there, or basically looking at them through a lens that they don't necessarily appreciate being looked at through. As far as, what have I learned from the program itself, I go put a lot of emphasis on the global systems class and just the technical learning of globalization. How can we understand globalization? Can we really understand it through, Wallerstein's or Wallerstein's theories, the core, the periphery, the semi-periphery, and whether a nation state is still the actor for change in our current world structure, or is it more of a non-state actor like a multinational corporation that wields the power, which is important, especially when we think of democratic institutions, which ones are going to better represent the will of the people. All right, and finally, I do think of global competency a lot of times through just my own, my experience with my family and how do I raise my boys. I have 3 boys to be globally competent, and what the insight that really kind of has developed is that it really is all about dialogue. It's about being put into an experience in situations where you're forced to have a dialogue with people, whether it's in a different language or people from a different culture, and that is the key behavior that we need to develop in not only our children, but probably in ourselves as well. How has my thinking about my position in the world shifted? It hasn't shifted much. I would say it's been reinforced that really kind of always understood that living in the United States that we're in a privileged position. And we're in a privileged position because we can choose to be, or can actually just be, ignorant of a lot of things and still have a great deal of success in the world, and it can accrue a great deal of wealth. You can have economic success and still be ignorant. You just look at the fact that I don't need to speak another language. I don't need to know much about other countries. I do an activity with my students where I have them draw America and define an American, and then we go to the dictionary and we find out that there's multiple definitions. And we talk about how Canadians and Mexicans and Colombians are very much aware that there's multiple definitions of America and Americans. But in the United States, we're often only aware of one. And so we can be successful. We can, basically, with limited knowledge, or you could say ignorant of other knowledge that is out there. So my fieldwork experience. What did I get from my fieldwork experience here? Some moments that strike me that coming back to my fieldwork experience was in Colombia. We started in Bogota, and it was education based. So we visited a lot of educational institutions. This first institution right here is Sabio Caldas, and it was a school that was built to service the population of what used to be just a displaced person's barrio. And so the residents kind of just moved in, started building structures, and then the services, the government came in later and provided services such as running water and schools in this case. And the thing that I take from this particular experience is that we talk a lot about in the United States about how the school is the heart of the community, it's the soul of the community. Well, Sabio Caldas really was, in that the community was made up of former enemies. You had, former guerrilla group members and their families, former paramilitary groups members and their families, displaced persons that were, basically victims from both groups, all living side by side together, and still a lot of strife. But when the kids came to school, they basically, learned the values of unity, and then took those back out into the community. And you see a lot of community building. You see the heart, the values, the beliefs kind of going from the school out into the community. There's Sabio Caldas right there, one of the events that they put on for us. Another thing that I really put a lot of emphasis on is we had a meal with Pedro Medina, who was the former head of McDonald's in Colombia, and he had this epiphany one day when there was roughly 4 million people that were emigrating from Colombia, and they were leaving. He had a conversation with some students in this class he was lecturing. I think he couldn't justify why would they should stay, and he was like, well, that's horrible. This is our country. And so he created a group that's called Yo Creo en Colombia, and basically it was all about starting to believe in Colombia, that Colombia could be a great place, and is a great place to live and to stay and to build lives. And the interesting thing, though, is when we went there and we visited him, he talked about his group, but he did on a micro level. He modeled for us on a micro level what we strive to do on a global scale. He took a group of people that were disparate individuals. We had really nothing in common, except we all had an interest in visiting Colombia on an educational experience. And he told us, hey, we'll be talking, but I need you to cook. And we didn't know about this in advance. And he just, here's what I have, and said, make what you like. And so we were forced to kind of communicate, to dialogue with each other, really develop an appreciation for everybody's talent, skills, and personality, and different ways of seeing the world. And so we transitioned in that one evening. We transitioned from a group of disparate individuals into a community that really had some strong ties with each other. This is an indigenous boarding school that we visited. This was more along the coast and the Caribbean coast. We climbed about 4.5 hours into the mountains to get to this school. Unfortunately, it was not open, but we did talk with some of the indigenous Kogi people that inhabited the village right next door to the school. The thing that strikes me, that I take with me from this experience, is that the Kogi, are a group of indigenous people in Colombia that are striving to maintain their way of life. And they've negotiated a deal with the government to provide schooling, but they kind of have a lot of influence on what the standards are going to be and what the goal of the curriculum is. Because for them, it's all about creating a population within their population that will have the skills to navigate a middle ground and preserve their way of life. So that's intriguing and striking. Our final destination was Barranquilla. I visited a kind of a Catholic girls' school, and it was called Madre Marcelina, and I had an opportunity to do some professional development with the staff members there, and we basically sat down and we talked about what global means and what competencia might mean. I spelled competencia wrong in Espanol, but no one noticed. That's okay. We all laughed about it later. But the striking thing is what I took away from that is in the United States, and we talk about being globally competent, we often talk about the skills that I might need to be able to accrue wealth or preserve my wealth on a global scale. Whereas in Colombia, that was still part of it, but they really stressed the idea of values and of valuing, different cultures and different ideas, and making sure that there was that value for a world community, so that there would be no dominant player on that stage. So as far as personal integration, I'm kind of struggling in this area. This is what I'm hoping for with the capstone. I do see have been doing some professional integration as far as with our current event standards. A lot of them are about how a person can influence public policy. So it's adding an additional lens to how we can view public policy and weigh public policy and determine whether it is beneficial or not. I also see some benefit in just dialoguing with students in class and with families that happen to come from a different culture as well. So as far as my capstone project, or my brainstorm for it, is up at the high school. We have a May term where students usually they can design projects of their own that they pursue, whether they're internships or learning opportunities. Thought we could take in, working with the teaching and learning director is providing global competency, a broad opportunity for students where they might get specific credit that could be on their transcript that says globally competent or an endorsement, but really providing them an opportunity to start that dialogue and start development of the behaviors, the skills, the attitudes that we would find in a globally competent person, one that really, you see the mission statement for Edina Public Schools down here, one that would allow them to achieve it. So really I'm looking at kind of designing a class, maybe an online class. I have different components that I'm kind of playing around with in my mind as well. Well, there you go. I hope this is enough in what you're looking for. And my hair's a mess. This is my workstation here. I got all my toys back there. And there you go. All right.